Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people across the great state of Mississippi who are focused on making this such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, I've got three quotes to share with you today that popped up. I don't know who said them. There was no attribution, but they're all really good ones to hear. The first one is this: you don't improve your life by doing more. You improve it by doing less of what doesn't matter. You know, as a former CEO, I can absolutely tell you that the key to my success along the way, to the extent that I was able to have success, it was based on, being able to prioritize and figure out what I don't need to do. People have a tendency to just bring more stuff on and get overwhelmed, and they don't jettison stuff. And you improve it by doing less of what doesn't matter. Here's another one. If your absence doesn't bother them, then your presence never mattered to them in the first place. I thought that was really good. We tend to put too much focus on what other people think. And, one of the things I learned along the way is who is in my inner circle, who really matters to me, and I don't overrate the other stuff at all. But, that's a really good one. And the last one is this: some people are waiting to see you fail. Some are waiting to see you quit. Let them wait forever. To me, that one speaks to dogged determination and, finding the people who are going to support us in our lives and moving forward. Okay, now we're going to shift gears. Listen, the other day I had my son-in-law, Keith Williams Jr., was standing in line down in downtown Gulfport to get a king set cake from Loblolly Bakery. And I thought, I want to circle back with my friend Robert St. John and see how things are going. He got some really good ratings from the New York Times as it relates to his bakery. There's been some social media buzz because their king cakes got really highly rated. He was on a few weeks ago to talk about it, but I thought I'd invite him back and just kind of get an update and continue the conversation with him. Without any further ado, let me welcome my friend Robert St. John back to the Ricky Matthews Show. How you doing, Robert?
Hey, Ricky. How are you? Good to be back.
I'm doing great, man.
Always good to be with you, my friend.
It's good to always be with you as well. Hey, listen, Justin, we'll come back. We'll come back to the fervor around your king cakes. I know king cakes well because when I was in New Orleans at the Times Picayune and all that this time of year, man, they were just filtering in from all over the city. And king cakes are a lot like gumbo. No one of them are the same. But you studied it like you study everything else that you do, probably to the nth degree, and you came up with a great recipe that has been extremely well received. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But just in general, how's business going for you?
Business is great. We our business overall in all our restaurants really cranks up right at the 1st of February. January is a little bit of a lull, not the slowest month of the year typically. That's September and then October. But January is about the third slowest. Everybody's coming out of the holidays and spend all that money, and so we just use January really to crank up and put all of our focus on king cakes because that season started on the 6th.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about the king cake that has, sort of re-upped the conversation, and that is when you come down here to distribute them, again, we'll get to the details of that here shortly, but when you come down here to distribute them, you're doing it where you're going to be opening your new restaurant at Triple A Day, the old Triple A Day building in downtown Gulfport. And that has actually increased the amount of energy that people have on social media wondering about when that restaurant's going to be open. Because, Triple A Day was part of the culture of downtown Gulfport.
Yeah.
There's so many great stories that emanate from there. And you can't wait to get that to become part of the culture yourself, can you?
I really can't. It's so what we're doing in that building, we have a restaurant here in Hattiesburg. I spent probably 10 years kind of researching and developing a breakfast lunch concept. And it took that long to finally get the right location, which we did. And I think we've been open 6 years. It's a restaurant called the Midtowner. And we're directly across from Southern Miss on Hardy Street in Hattiesburg. 2 blocks away from the hospital, 2 blocks away from Hattiesburg Clinic. And so it's perfectly situated in the best part of town. A breakfast lunch place could be situated. Plus, Jones Company's just finishing up an office building that'll have about 250, 300 people working there. So we love that location. The restaurant has been well received from day one. I'm a huge breakfast person, always have been, and never miss breakfast. Always wanted to own a breakfast place, but I'm also a big meat and three guy. I love Southern food and that kind of cooking that reminds me of my grandmother. And so I also wanted to have a place like that. I didn't want it to just be a breakfast brunch place. And so we do real breakfast. And we do a lot of breakfast items all the way till 2 when we close. But then we do meat and three at lunch: fried chicken, meatloaf, chicken and dumplings, fried okra, corn, turnip greens, all the things that we know that we grew up on. And it went over very well. I eat there every morning. If I'm in town, I'm sitting at table 19 at 7 a.m. every morning. So it's one of my favorite concepts that we have. And we're going to grow a little bit with it, but we're really not. It's not like a multi-unit thing. We may do 2 more, one of which is going to be in Gulfport. And I don't know if there's a better location in the state other than where we already are than the old Triplet Day building right there, kind of catty corner from Hancock. And it's the good thing. I was there. I don't know. I think I was there Thursday or Friday, whatever day we brought king cakes down, and we had Miss Love showed up. She was one of the owners, and she's got a whole album full of photographs and everything she's going to share with me, and we're going to use a lot of those. But several other people came up. A couple of business owners from down the street. Yeah, I used to eat breakfast here every morning, or I used to have lunch here every day. And so we're looking forward to coming back in and being a part of the community. And my goal, when we open that place, it's really a community cafe, which is really something nobody's ever doing anymore. Most things years ago, say in 1940, and when you walk into this place, you'll feel like it's been there since 1948. But in 1948, the only thing most cities, especially our size, had were community cafes or a fine dining restaurant or two that were typically manned by a French chef. And that's all there was. I mean, that's what people had. It's what people lived on. It's what worked in the markets. And then we just got into, starting in the 70s and the 80s, theme restaurants and all of these other things. Fern bars came in and all those kind of things. And we got away from the community cafe, which is a place where everybody in the community can go and share a meal. Anybody who wants to eat can afford to eat there, and the food is exceptional. And that's what we're going to open, the most Gulfport restaurant ever in Gulfport, Mississippi. It'll be covered on the walls with photographs over the history of the coast, namely and mainly Gulfport. And we'll be a part of the community, and that's what I wanted to do here. We've got the system down pat. We know how to do it, and so it made perfect sense to go an hour and 15 minutes due south into an area that really I consider the Gulf Coast kind of my second home anyway. And we'll be there, and we're excited to be coming that way.
Well, what's interesting, and we'll pick this up on the other side of the show, but this is not, while this is a restaurant group out of Hattiesburg that's coming to the coast, your connection to the coast is in your DNA, going back to the fish camp that your mother bought, to writing the book about Walter Anderson, your work on Mississippi public TV, your connections to the coast are extensive. In a way, you're not coming to a Hattiesburg group coming to Gulfport to open a restaurant. You're coming home in a way, aren't you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it really is. I've always felt like it's my second home. I spent all my summers on the coast, and I had my first raw oyster at Bear Sev's. Um, one of my favorite meals as a kid was always at the Friendship House, or and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the restaurant that was at the Broadwater out on the point.
Yeah.
The seafood restaurant. But those
Was it the Marina?
were my go-to.
The Marina restaurant?
Maybe that's it. And then also the tiki
like
room at Mary Walker Marina over on the Pascagoula River in Goche. And so, I grew up eating that food, and my love of seafood, and we sell a ton of seafood in our restaurants, 100% came from the coast. So I'm not a full-time resident, but it's an independent restaurant that will employ local folks, and we're, again, going to be the most Gulfport restaurant ever in Gulfport.
When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Robert St. John and get into the king cake craze that's happening right now. We'll see you after this break. Listen, Robert St. John is a restaurateur, he's a chef, he's a contributor to SuperTalk Mississippi, he's an author, he's a TV personality, and he's really dedicated to Mississippi. How I got to know Robert St. John was back in the post-Katrina recovery effort. He and I were on the Governor's Commission together, and I was always impressed that he was willing to drive down from Hattiesburg and participate in those proceedings. They were so important. And he has a great connection to coastal Mississippi. There's so many different ways he's connected here. And we'll remind you of some of that. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Extra Table, Robert, the work that Extra Table does across the state, and especially here in coastal Mississippi, to provide healthy foods to various efforts to feed people who can't feed themselves. It's just your connections are cover the spectrum, don't they?
Yeah, really. Again, like I said earlier, I feel very at home on the coast. I was driving home when I was down there last week with the king cakes and checking on progress at the restaurant. I was driving back, and I was talking to my COO, and I just said I was about halfway. I was a little below Wiggins, I guess, and I spoke to him, and I said, "Man, it's so much. I love this drive from Gulfport to Hattiesburg on 49 because it never feels like I'm away from home ever. It's still." I mean, immediately after you get off the beach, once you go north I-10, it all feels the same. It's Pine Belt, which is in my blood, and so it's just it just really I've spent so much time down there. It feels like a second home, and I end up in Jackson a lot too, and going back and forth in Jackson, it's a whole different vibe driving home from Gulfport to Hattiesburg than it is driving home from Jackson to Hattiesburg. And I love it down there. The people, I host tours about 4 months out of the year in Europe. And I know if I've got some coast people on my tours, we're going to have fun. It's always,
and you do. I mean, I
the life of the party.
And others that you've done a great job of developing this network that includes people from across the state, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, the tours, I mean, they come from all over the country. Portland, Oregon, and Pittsburgh, a lot of Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, Texas, they come from all over on those tours. But when we have coast folks, it's always a good time.
So, listen, you mentioned a few minutes ago, we'll get to Lob Lolly here in just a second. You mentioned just a few minutes ago about how, seafood, cooking seafood, the culture around seafood is in your blood. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of conversations here in coastal Mississippi recently about the Gulf Fresh seafood brand and why that's so important. And I think there's going to be some really good focus this year from a number of organizations and from the Mississippi legislature, for that matter, to reestablish why this is an incredibly important conversation and maybe put some checks and balances in place. But you previously told me about your commitment to this. And it's something that is, again, I keep saying this, but it's in your DNA. But you understand why that brand is so important to coastal Mississippi, don't you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's if I would tell anybody who is within earshot of this interview right now, if you haven't been to the Seafood Museum there in Biloxi, right there by the bridge, and you live on the coast, then you've got to sometime within the next day or two from hearing this, go visit that, because it's going to make you so proud of your heritage. And at one time, we were the seafood capital of the world, and the seafood hadn't changed. It's just the volume that's changed. So it is. I eat seafood all over the world, seriously, all over Europe, northern part in the Atlantic and the Pacific. I mean, everywhere. We've got the best seafood, so it's an easy sell for me. I mean, why wouldn't I? And we go through about 9 tons of filleted finfish a year. It's all Gulf fish. We go through almost 20 tons of Gulf shrimp. I don't know. I used to know the number on oysters, but all of it comes out of the Gulf, and why not? Because I mean, it's the best. So we're blessed, and I don't care what anybody says. The oysters that we get from Texas all the way to the Panhandle are the best, and the shrimp and all the fish is just better. So it was an easy sell for me. Like I said earlier, I had my first raw oyster at Bear Sev's. My go-to was fried shrimp. I still like fried shrimp. I mean, that was like a treat. We didn't eat out much when I was a kid, but when we did, man, and I could go somewhere and get fried shrimp, that was like the ultimate delicacy for me, and still is. And that's one thing at the Downtowner when we open in Gulfport. And we should be opening sometime in August. We're breakfast, lunch 7 days a week, but on Friday and Saturday nights we're going to open up. And we're going to do what I call Old Line Coast seafood, which, trout almondine, stuffed broiled flounder, fried shrimp, all those dishes I grew up eating when I was a kid on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, when we had our fish camp down there and we just went, for weekends. Then, we're going to have that on Friday and Saturday nights, because really, we've kind of gotten away from that too. And it's not because those aren't good dishes. It's because we think we can make things better, more relevant, or more modern, or whatever. And you don't want to lose the heritage. And the Downtowners is going to be all about heritage cuisine, 100%.
That's really awesome. It's so interesting that you are, you have this focus on breakfast. You say that's one of your favorite, if not the favorite meal of the day for you. And then, of course, you wrote the book on Mississippi mornings, and the response and the reviews on the book have been absolutely terrific, haven't they?
Yeah, that was it was very well received. I was really happy about that. I'd wanted to do, I think it was my 13th book, and I had wanted to do it way back to my fourth book, and just finally came around to doing that. And yeah, it was very well received, but it was basically a love letter to my favorite meal of the day, which I was talking to somebody the other day. I can't remember. This is a true statement. I really can't remember the last time I missed a breakfast. There wasn't some kind of, I had a doctor's appointment where I had to be fasting or something. And, it would be decades, like literally decades. I spent 6 months touring Europe with my family back in 2011. We never missed breakfast. My son and I got up every morning. He and I went to breakfast while the girls slept. So it's just, I'm a huge breakfast fan. Therefore, I put a lot of time and attention on owning a restaurant that serves breakfast.
Listen, it's one of my favorite meals too. That's one of the reasons I don't do it, because I've been intermittent fasting for a couple of years now. But when we take trips, wherever we go, breakfast is one of the most popular meals that we get into. And at some point, I have to join you for breakfast somewhere along the way, and I'll make an exception to the rule. I'm touched by, like, for example, when we went up to Yellowstone National Park this past year, and there's some of the best restaurant spots on the outside of that national park. And we love to go get some really, really, really fresh bacon and great pancakes. I thought about you and your was it your mother's or your grandmother's recipe that you did?
Grandmother, yeah, my maternal grandmother.
So, I mean, You don't you didn't come out of a box, does it?
No, no, and that's the one thing. Yeah, her recipe. She was originally from Nashville, so I'm sure that recipe came from there, probably more than 100 years ago. It's in the cookbooks on my website too. Anybody goes to robertstjohn.com and just types in pancakes, it's the most downloaded recipe by far on my website. But yeah, out west, here's the thing, you know, meals in the South, and especially our portion of the South, because we're close to Louisiana, we're on the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America now, and we got all these great flavors. You know, the thing is, the Midwestern palate is totally different, a little bland. The Northeastern palate's a little bit, really everywhere. The flavors are intense here, but where breakfast is good across, the meal that is good across the country, no matter where you are, is breakfast. And I was in Whitefish, Montana a few years back and found a great restaurant. And that's what I do when I'm traveling. I go down to the lobby and talk to the front desk. I say, hey, where is the local breakfast joint, with the independently owned breakfast joint? And I want to go where the old guys are in there talking sports and politics, because that's what's going to tell me more about that town than any CVB or tourism bureau or anything, because that's what makes the character of a town is its local breakfast place. That's what, and that's why the downtowner is gonna be a beacon for Gulfport in that area.
Hey, we one of our favorite places in the country is Whitefish, Montana, and I can't remember the name of it, but I've been to the exact restaurant that you're talking about for breakfast.
I think it's Buffalo Grill or something like
that. That sounds very familiar.
And the hash browns are killer too. They got killer hash browns there. They're different.
Yeah, we've been there. I know exactly where it is downtown. Listen, when we continue our conversation with Robert St. John, we're going to really drill down on the craze around the king cakes from Loblolly Bakery. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We're visiting with my friend Robert St. John, someone I enjoy checking in with. He's an entrepreneur, columnist, TV personality. He's kind of done it all, but it's really awesome to see him really staking a claim in downtown Gulfport with his new restaurant, and also watching the evolution of the Loblolly Bakery that he started in Hattiesburg. You know, John, okay, first of all, let's kind of start with the end in mind. First of all, congratulations on the New York Times recognition. My goodness. Tell people more about that.
Yeah, so I was in Chicago moving my son in. He works for a restaurant group up there and just graduated from culinary school. And we were, we were at his graduations, what it was, from culinary school in New York. And I got a call from Brett Anderson, who's New Orleans and was with Times-Picayune when you were there.
Yeah, I know him well. Yes.
And writes for the New York Times. He's the food guy for the New York Times. And he asked me a couple of questions about the bakery. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe, I figured we were going to be a sentence in a longer article about the bakery and maybe Southern bakeries or things like that. And so I answered his questions, and he said a photographer maybe call in, and a photographer texted me, and I was really busy with my son's graduation, wasn't really thinking much. They asked for a few images, so I sent them whatever they asked for, high def stuff. And then, I was focused on my son's graduation, and then came back, and I want to say it was either Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, maybe New Year's Eve. And I was sitting in the bakery, actually, with my leadership team, and we were going over king cake season, which was coming up in a week. So it must have been New Year's Eve. And we were about a week away, and we're just planning and, let's get all the stuff together. And somebody texted me on my phone, congratulations, my brother-in-law from Switzerland just read the New York Times about the bakery. And I hadn't even thought about it, and it's because I had been so busy up in New York. And so I said, guys, hold on a minute. And I went and looked, and sure enough, there was an article called Top 22 Bakeries in the U.S. and we were one of the top 22. Man, we were celebrating and hooting and hollering, and it was a very pleasant surprise. Where I was very honored. And again, when he called, I just figured it was going to be a sentence about something. I had no idea we would be among a list of bakeries from all over the country. And so it was good that I was in the bakery when we got that news, because I was able to celebrate with the people who were responsible for us, not me. I kind of share the vision and steer the ship a little bit, but it's the people that are in that bakery every day who earned that, and I'm very proud for them. It was a bakery was also a long time dream for me to own a bakery, because I'm such a fan of bakeries. I'm not a baker. I worked early in my career as a chef, but I'm more of a savory chef. I can make an Italian cream cake. That's about it. And so, we've got a very, very talented team, and we've had a little turnover in leadership really since we opened. And the team that's in there now are solid, and they deserve the credit. Not only for that New York Times recognition, but also for these king cakes we're making, because we tweaked last year's king cake recipe and made it even better. So when we do open on the coast, we'll be shipping king cakes down every morning, fresh out of the oven, and the breads we'll use at the downtown will be baked at Loblolly in Hattiesburg. And you never know, we may end up with a commissary kitchen or something down there, because we're going to do an Ed's Burger joint in Gulfport as well. We're looking for a location right now for that. And Loblolly Bakery, our bakery, bakes all the buns for Ed's too. They're really good hamburger buns. So, it's going really well.
What a great economies of scale. Listen, I want to just mention, for people, if you enjoy food or you like food critics or restaurant critics, not even really critics, but people who write about the restaurant experience and have a way with words, Brett Anderson is by far, in my opinion, the top restaurant food writer in the United States, bar none. And I when I was published with the Times, speaking of Noah.com, he was a colleague, and I had the opportunity to watch him in action. Man, he is a gifted writer. I mean, he could write about anything. He chooses to write about this subject. But have you ever met anyone better at a craft than him?
No, and I love sharing a meal. My favorite thing to do really is just share a meal with somebody, and you're on a whole different level. And he and I have had a few breakfasts together. I hadn't seen him. I've seen him once briefly in a coffee shop since COVID, and was able just to say, hey, but I need to give him a call. We can sit down and tie the feed bags on again, because he's. I love to talk restaurants. I love to talk food, and he's not only a gifted writer, but he's passionate about that business as well.
No, I agree 100%. The last time he and I went to spend a meal together was at was lunch in New Orleans, and he wished he could be discreet, but when Brett and I walked in, it was like a ripple went across the restaurant. I mean, every single person there, especially the people who worked there, knew Brett was in the building. He's got that kind of reputation, and it was awesome to have lunch sitting next to Brett, knowing that everybody there, especially at the restaurant, knew who he was, because the treatment was terrific. But anyway, yeah, he's a talented dude. So congratulations on that. And then the King Cake Mafia did their thing. And that was great to see, and it traveled like wildfire, didn't it?
That was another thing. I need to hang out with my son more, because I was in Chicago. That's where I got it confused. I was in Chicago with my wife, visiting my son on a couple of his days off. It was just last week, and we were in an Uber on the way to a eating place. And somebody texted, hey, King Cake Mafia reviewed Loblolly's king cake. And I kind of went, ooh, because Louisiana people a lot of times look down on Mississippi, and they think, if it's not done in New Orleans, we always get there's a preface. I've had a Creole New Orleans themed restaurant for 38 years. And every time we've got somebody, a lot of times when we have somebody from down here say, I'm from New Orleans now, I know food. They always preface it with that. So I'm like, man, these guys are, all they do this time of year is eat and rate king cakes. And so I kind of opened it. We're in the Uber, and I hit play. And I was like, okay, I don't know how
you were breathing hard.
Said, we're doing a Mississippi king cake. And I was like, oh. And so I'm watching it, but he, the more I watched it, and then we got towards the end, because and I agree with this, they have Dong Fong as a 10 out of 10, which to me is the gold standard of king cake. The Vietnamese bakery there on Chef Mentor Highway was excellent. They won a James Beard Award. I mean, they know what they're doing. That king cake, I set out 3 years ago. I went down to New Orleans. I brought 32 king cakes back to Hattiesburg from all the bakeries. Tried every one of them. I did it for two reasons. One, I wanted to kind of come up with exactly, the bakery wasn't open yet, but I wanted to problem solve how we were going to do our king cake. But two, be honest with you, I kind of wanted to disprove that Dong Fong was probably, it's the popular one. I bet it's not really the best. And what I did, I proved to myself it's the best. And so as these guys were rating it, I was watching the TikTok review. One guy gave it a 9.7, which I was tickled to death with. And then the second guy said, Dong Fong's a 10. This is a 10 out of 10. And I was like, man, when we got that, I was in the Uber and we were hooting and hollering, and it was validation again for the team who is in there. Like, there's one day last week they made 400 in a day. We could have sold 400 in Gulfport if I brought that many down. We only brought 150 down, and the first few people last week when we were there, we're getting 4 and 5, and we had to kind of drop. I hate it. We had to drop it to only one per person, because I wanted to make sure everybody who was there. We had about 100 or so people in line, and we were able to get everybody that was there in line a king cake. But we'll come back. We're coming again, I think, twice before the season ends to the Gulf Coast, to Gulfport, and we'll set up there at the Downtowner, and we'll bring more next time. I don't know if we can bring 400, but yeah, that team deserves credit. We have a solid team. They're working around the clock. People are getting there at midnight. People are working in the afternoons. It's I'm really proud of the king cake. And what I did is I took that Dong Fong and basically just reverse engineered it on what do we need to do to make ours this good or better.
Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll give you a little bit more details about that in our final segment with Robert St. John. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with my friend Robert St. John, and we're talking about the success now, actually, of his king cake. The King Cake Mafia rated it a 10 out of 10. The actual bakery itself, the Loblolly Bakery in Hattiesburg, has been identified by the New York Times as one of the top 22 bakeries in the entire United States. What a great distinction. And you talked about how you did some re-engineering to discover the approach that you wanted to take. And by the way, I know so many options in king cakes in New Orleans, and you kind of zeroed in on the one that was a big favorite for a lot of people there in the New Orleans region. But describe your king cake to the general public. What is it that makes it so special? Why do they stand in line to get it?
Yeah, and we're grateful for that. I think it's several things. I took what I don't like about king cake and did the opposite. And I took what Dong Fong gets right and tried to replicate. And so what it is, a lot of king cakes that you eat, a lot of them are dry and a little hard. And so I knew it had to be soft and fairly moist. So the actual cake part. Another beef I've always had with king cake is the icing is overly sweet and kind of hard and cracks. And so I didn't want that. I want something that was soft, but just sweet enough, And then so many of the bakeries dump tons of granulated sugar on top. And so we just put just enough to color it. And pretty much, that's it. The bread, that is such a huge part of it, is the actual cake has to be good. It has to be moist. It has to be soft. And then the icing has to be soft, not too sweet, and then you just can't dump too much sugar on it. And that's kind of the formula we follow. We don't have really like 8 or 10. We have 4 that we focus on and do those the best we can. And we added one last week. So our base color, we have a traditional cinnamon. Then we have a cream cheese and cinnamon. And then we have a pecan praline with tres leche in it. And then we do a blueberry, which is the most popular one, blueberry and cream cheese. And another one of my beefs, when you get fruit-filled king cakes at a lot of bakeries, they're just buying these number 10 cans of like jelly donut filling and filling it up. And what we do with our blueberry, and we also have a strawberry one, so now we're doing strawberry on occasion, is we're using blueberries. I mean, there's it's a great blueberry farm right outside of Hattiesburg called Sandy Run Farms. It's run by a friend of mine named Tim Goggins. He has tons of blueberries. And so we get him to put up and freeze thousands of pounds of blueberries at the peak of the season. And we use those in our pastries throughout the year. And then that's what we put in our king cake. So it's not a bunch of basically sweet blueberry donut filling in there. It's just cream cheese, cinnamon, and blueberries. So
from all the taste testing. Yeah. From all the taste testing that I had the opportunity to do when I was in New Orleans, you described exactly what the majority of the people who did the tasting, and lots of them had really discerning palates, trust me, was moist. They wanted it to be moist and not overly sweet. And man, did I take some good ones. You mentioned proline. I really like that, actually. I mean, that's one of my favorite, actually. But it's actually good to see it. And one of the interesting things on your social media, I would encourage people to follow you. Robert St. John is easy to find. You do a great job of taking people behind the scenes. And one of the things that I noticed on one of the videos you posted, people didn't know you were coming in. You went in, you got to see them doing what they normally do. It wasn't staged in any way. What was interesting to me was you had one sitting up there, and people were in the process of completing it. But it was not like this huge assembly line. Somebody was sitting there and doctoring that one, and then the next one they doctored that one. There's some care, so it takes a lot of work to do 400.
Oh, I mean, they're all done by hand. Somebody gets there at midnight, 1 a.m. We start baking cakes, and then we have the pastry team gets in, and they're also doing croissants and chocolate croissants and almond croissants and chocolate almond croissants and ham and cheese croissants, different Danish and different sweet rolls every morning, in addition to, decorating the king cakes and everything. And it would be probably more efficient if we could set up some kind of Henry Ford like line, but we're working out of small cramped spaces, and we're pumping out all sorts of breads, loaf bread, sourdough, and all those other things as well. So I'm actually working on a commissary kitchen right now, and hopefully next year, because we could really sell 1,000 a day. We're not even shipping, and we have so many requests for shipping that next year we'll be able to ship, and we're going to be supplying Gulfport with 100 or 200 a day, and so we'll be doing a lot of that out of a commissary kitchen that we'll also use for our restaurants.
Shipping's going to open up some unbelievable opportunities. Oh my goodness. The network you'll be able to tap into. Goodness gracious. That'll be fun to watch. We're out of time, but it's been a pleasure to catch up with you. Congratulations on your success.
Thank you, buddy.
You bet. It's been a pleasure. It's been Robert St. John. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.